Welcome to the Vision by Protiviti podcast. I'm Joe Kornik, Editor-in-Chief of Vision by Protiviti, a global content resource examining big themes that will impact the C-suite and executive boardrooms worldwide. Today, we're exploring the future of government, and I'm joined by Tom Vartanian, an author, lawyer, futurist, board member, and former federal bank regulator. Currently, Tom is the Executive Director of the Financial Technology and Cybersecurity Center, the Alexandria, Virginia-based nonprofit that advocates for dynamic financial services and public policies. Tom served as a regulator in both the Reagan and Carter Administrations, and he is the author of 9 books, including his latest, 2023's The Unhackable Internet: How Rebuilding Cyberspace Can Create Real Security and Prevent Financial Collapse. Tom, thank you so much for joining me today.
Joe, great to be back.
Tom, as I mentioned in my introduction there, you are the Executive Director of the Financial Technology and Cybersecurity Center. Can you tell us a little bit about the center and its mission?
Yeah, what I wanted to do after being a regulator for a number of years and practicing law for 40 years is sort of bring to bear the concerns I had about the future of financial services, and particularly as it's impacted by technology and security questions. And so what we wanted to do was set up a center that would focus on cybersecurity, focus on the future of fintech, and key on to the issues that we think we need to consider to make financial stability the preeminent and dominant concern in the future.
Yeah, I mentioned your excellent book in the intro, and in it you address the threats facing the integrity of our national security and our financial services sector, including the possibility of sort of cyber attacks by foreign adversaries like China and Russia. Your book poses a challenge to America to take the lead and create a coalition of democratic nations to implement financial cyber strategies. So why do you think this is so critical to the future?
You know, you can go on the CISA's website today and look at the numbers that they have prominently on their website. CISA, which of course is part of the Department of Homeland Security, says that 1 in 5 people in America have malware on their computers. 1 in 3. 47% of us in the country have had personally identifiable information collected about us. 47%. 600,000 accounts are hacked daily. $4 billion in crypto is stolen each year. And ransomware attacks are now averaging the theft of more than 500 million. There are more than 500 million ransomware attacks every year. 500 million around the world. And so what you see is a scale of devastation and destruction that has to be put into some context relative to the enhancement of the human quality of life that technology can provide. And I think we are losing the battle in that balance because we're irrationally focused on the upside of technology and not very focused on what can happen on the downside. We don't know so much about technology, and we're playing as if it's always going to be benevolent and good to us. But the problem is that there are so many people increasingly every year using it for bad purposes and to steal money or to influence elections or bring down governments.
So let me ask you a question. As a country, is the United States of America doing enough? I mean, do we've got the right people on it? Do we have the right investment pointed at it? I mean, how are we doing in that realm?
Yeah, I think, Joe, that we are playing into the hands of our adversaries. Let me say it this way. If we wanted to build a system to allow our adversaries to take as much advantage of critical infrastructures, money, power, and every possible aspect that our government relies on, we would have built the system we've built online, right? Because it is highly insecure and it is increasingly vulnerable to attack. When the internet started in 1969, the ARPANET, right? It was established to communicate messages, not to store data. And here we are all these years later, storing all of the data on the planet and all of the value on the planet on a system that was never built to do that, right? So again, I think it changes the scales and the balance of things. It allows countries that shouldn't be able to punch above their weight to punch above their weight. And North Korea is probably the best example of that. It's basically running its economy off hacking, right? And it's giving it's all of this money they're making from hacking everything around the world. It's giving this money to run its economy and run a nuclear program, right? So we've got to start seeing that we can't think in terms of traditional regulation, traditional concepts, if we're moving forward in a world where the scale has changed and the balance between good and bad is now moving dramatically. So my bottom line is that we need leaders in this country to basically move forward with an agreement among democracies. Forget the other countries that aren't going to come in, dictatorships and totalitarian government. They're never going to come along because they're now seeing technology as the way that they can control their people. I mean, if we had an hour, we could talk about what's going on in China with 300 million facial recognition cameras, giving everybody a social score, right? So for totalitarian governments and dictators, technology is now the greatest thing in their hands because it will prevent them from ever being out of power. Because with facial recognition, they will know when two people are meeting that they think shouldn't be meeting. And that's pretty scary. I think, in answer to your question, the government hasn't done enough, isn't spending enough, and isn't focused enough on these issues. Because at the end of the day, said very simply, a lot of these issues are not campaign issues you can raise money off of, right? And those are the issues, whether they're important or not, that tend to draw political donations and that the politicians tend to focus on. The second problem is that I don't think most people on the Hill understand more about technology than how to turn on their computers. I mean, you can watch any congressional hearing you like. The ones with Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook were interesting. And you realize that most of the questions have been written down, and the people asking those questions really don't understand the broad significance of the questions and the answers that they're getting. And the sad thing is that Bill Clinton in 1996 nailed the problem. He identified critical infrastructure. He had great people working on his cybersecurity proposals. And he nailed the problem. And he laid out the fact that we need to protect critical infrastructures because of the inherent vulnerabilities of the systems that they're on. And 25 years later, probably 27 years later now, we really haven't made much progress. If you compare, as I did in the book, the executive orders of President Clinton, President Bush, President Obama, President Trump, and now President Biden, they look eerily alike, as if somebody's just cut and pasting every 4 years. Who's running the technology parade? The technology parade is being run by the private sector, large, big tech companies. And so at the end of the day, I ask the following question. You may not like the politicians we have. You may not think they're making decisions. You may not think they're doing anything. But at the end of the day, do you want them deciding the future of your life as elected officials that you can elect or unelect? Or do you want Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg making those decisions? Because that's who's making those decisions today, the guys that run big tech. And that's not the world I want to live in.
Tom, it's some pretty scary scenarios that you sort of laid out, and something that would require, cooperation first in this country and then globally among other countries. It just feels like a pretty daunting task, to be quite frank.
Yeah, let me give you one. Let me leave you with one example, Joe, just very briefly. So today, RSA encryption, which is the typical encryption being used by financial institutions to protect data, is a 2048-bit encryption. which means the key is 2048 bits long, and to make it simple, it's very complicated keys. And so to run a brute force against a 2048-bit encryption data, you'd probably need 300 trillion years to break it. And then you might break it on the first try, but to go through every possible permutation to break a 2048 RSA bit encryption, you would probably need 300 trillion years. All right. Quantum computing. We are now within 10 years of having high-powered quantum computing, which will be, for some purposes, enormously powerful and enormously useful. A 4,099 qubit quantum computer, and we have only now, I think we're now just approaching 1,000 qubits quantum computing. So that's a ways off, but a 4,099 qubit quantum computer can reportedly break that 2048-bit encryption, not in 300 trillion years, but in 10 seconds. So that's why it's being reported that the Chinese are gathering up all of the encrypted information they can today, so they will be able to decrypt it tomorrow.
Tom, do you think, is the United States far behind the rest of the world when it comes to this, making sure that we're protecting ourselves?
Yeah, it's a great question. I addressed that question in the Unhackable Internet, and I said, China's going to have some severe economic problems themselves. But China's plan is to, by 2030, have the largest economy in the world, the most sophisticated technological prowess, be dominant in artificial intelligence, and be dominant in quantum computing. If they do those four things, that's not going to be a good day for the United States of America. And they're outspending us in each of those areas. They're outspending us in artificial intelligence. They're outspending us in quantum computing. They have built bigger quantum networks than we have built, right? And I think we're thinking like people who have been on top, not realizing it's harder to stay on top than it is to get there. And everybody else is running fast to get to where we are. We've got to spend the money judiciously to guarantee our future in the technological sense.
So last question from me, Tom, and that's, how optimistic are you about the future when you sort of put it all together and take a look over the next, let's say 2030 and beyond? How optimistic are you that we'll get most of this right?
I think we're getting most of everything wrong today, and that makes me pessimistic. You can talk at any level, the social, cultural, financial, political. We just seem to be getting so many things wrong, and I equate it to a lack of the ability to prioritize. I think we've lost our capacity to prioritize the issues that are really, really important. And so I think we will continue to muddle along and do just fine as long as everybody else is doing worse. But as other countries and other systems begin to do better, it's going to shine a light on the flaws in our system. It's going to shine a light on the archaic makeup of our regulatory system. It's going to shine a light on the fact that we're focused on the wrong issues at the wrong time for the wrong reasons. It's going to focus a light on the fact that we've let so much of the financial services business that takes consumer dollars be completely unregulated. I am what I call guardedly pessimistic. We seem to muddle along and do just fine. But, when you look at something over a long trend line, which I tend to look at 25-year, trend lines, you can see we're not going in the right direction on any of these issues. And I wrote in one op-ed that I thought the only solution to those problems was better leadership. I concluded that we just weren't electing at any level the kinds of leaders we need to confront and solve these issues. And that, to me, is the fundamental problem that we've got. And unless we are able to stand up as voters and say, look, you got to give us better candidates.
Sure. That seems like almost an unsolvable problem. I hope I'm wrong, but that seems like a really, really difficult one to fix.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's why I'm guardedly pessimistic.
Well, Tom, you've given us a lot to think about today. I appreciate the time, the insights, and the conversation. Thanks so much.
Great, Joe. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
And thank you for listening to the Vision by Protiviti podcast. Please rate and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And be sure to visit vision.protiviti.com to view all of our latest content. Until next time, I'm Joe Kornik.